every once in a while you get this hands where it was stay, 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 and then the last few people go, "You're all staying," and they say, "I'm going to stay." And the last person says, "Hell, I'll stay." And it's like everybody's in the top pool, and it's just this huge swing because one person's winning all those cards.
Welcome to Cardboard Creations, where we discuss the process, techniques, and inspiration for designing board games. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm so thrilled to be here today with Richard Garfield to find out how Creature Feature was created. But first, let's jump into a brief overview of how Creature Feature works. Creature Feature is a hand management and bluffing game for 3 to 6 players where each player is an agent for a group of monsters during the golden age of monster movies in Hollywood. Over the course of 3 seasons, players compete for roles in movies different studios are making. There are 5 turns during a season, and each turn you'll reveal a new feature film tile and a short feature. Then, each player plays a star and a co-star movie card from their hand face down on their player board, and then all players simultaneously reveal only their co-star card. Then, in the audition phase, players decide in turn order if they want to stay and compete for the feature film or drop to either compete for the short feature or eventually fold. If a box has 2 or more pawns, there will be a showdown to determine whose co-star and star combination has the highest value. After all showdowns are resolved, winners score points for the tile they were competing for and their cards, as well as their opponent's cards if they want a showdown. There are also a variety of helper cards you can play during the game to trigger special abilities. At the end of the 3rd season, the agent with the most victory points wins the game. Hi Richard, welcome to the show!
Hi, it's great to be here.
It is awesome to have you here. You have an enormous amount of game design experience and such a diverse catalog of games that you've worked on. From Magic the Gathering to King of Tokyo to Robo Rally to Bunny Kingdom and Keyforge, just to name a few. With all your experience, it's no surprise that you create some of the coolest and most interesting card games in the industry. So I gotta know, what initially inspired you to create Creature Feature?
Well, I'm always looking for the game that I want to play, and what I've been looking for a long time is a good bluffing game. And there are some good bluffing games out there, but a lot of them don't deliver on the promise they make. They look like they're bluffing games, but maybe you should always bluff, or maybe you have to really know a lot about the game when you bluff. Or they're too simple. You want a little more depth, and so that's where Creature Feature came from, was this idea that there really could be a sort of a medium weight bluffing game that you could play pretty seriously, but have a lot of fun with as well.
Cool. And so it sounds like it started from the mechanism of, I want to make a cool bluffing game. But when did the theme kind of pop into the mix?
I'm a designer that works in both ways, from theme, sometimes from mechanisms other. And with this one, as you said, it was mechanics first, and it's been brewing in the back of my mind for a long time. When the theme came about was when I first started talking to Trick or Treat Games, the Trick or Treat Studios, the people who were interested in publishing it. And as you can say from their names, they're associated with all things Halloween, and
right.
And so that's really what drove the theme. And I thought, oh, you want a game from me? And I've been interested in working on this bluffing game. Creature Feature, sort of classic movie monsters, seemed like a natural place to take it.
Totally. So how did you get from your initial idea and that you're going to have this, Creature Feature monster movie kind of theme into a playable prototype?
Well, I think it came about pretty quickly. The whole game actually was designed definitely very quickly. The thing is that it's always hard to tell when you started, because I said I've been thinking about this for a long time, so a lot of the mechanics were already, I'd tinkered with them in other games and other prototypes, and so it's a little unfair to start the clock from the point when I said, "Oh yeah, I'll start making this movie monster bluffing game," and then it's done a few weeks later or a month later. But that said, I would say that that it was a couple weeks before I had something I really liked from the point when I started working on this game proper.
Gotcha. And what is your prototyping process like? I know you've worked on a ton of games, a lot of different card games. Like, how do you actually make your prototypes?
Well, that's changed with the pandemic state of the world. Prior to that, I would usually make paper prototypes using Illustrator, and I would make a whole bunch of cards. I would cut them out, put them in either put them in card sleeves or sticker cards, depending on my mood, and then I would get friends over and we'd play a bunch. And usually, sometimes those prototypes. It's surprising how often I would abandon the prototypes midway through. Like I would just realize, this isn't going to work. It would be better if I did it the other way. But then if it actually made it through my friends, then usually it would involve a lot of redesign and would have to try it again next week. And very often I would closet it after a few sessions.
Okay.
And it might languish in the closet, or it might be pulled out later. So I do a lot of exploratory design, I should say. Some of it I eventually plan to publish. Some of it is just for learning about systems, because
Sure.
we're all students of games, and no matter how experienced you get, that's what one of the things that makes it so exciting is that you just can't be the sort of expert which really allows you to take all the design into your head and know how it's going to work for most games. Post-pandemic, I've moved almost entirely onto virtual play tabletops. So I use a tabletop simulator, but I've used a lot of the different environments out there. And so now I throw together prototypes in the same sort of way, and I spend a lot of my week sort of pinging people, seeing if they want to jump in and try a game for half an hour.
Cool.
And basically just do the same thing virtually that I used to do physically.
Cool. And how much playtesting was done, and what is your playtesting process like? I mean, you kind of were getting into it a little bit there.
It changes from project to project. If it's a game which I'm mostly designing to sort of see how something works, then I'm involved. I'll get some people who are patient with my design, which I've got a bunch of people who are don't mind changing the rules halfway through, things like that.
Right.
With something like Creature Feature, or any game which is sort of more intentionally for publication, I do that as well, but rapidly get into the state where I'd prefer having a mix of people who have played the game before and fresh people, and I'm there just helping and getting it to move along. I mean, everybody, of course, will say this is like playtesting is really important. Getting a broad set of playtesters is really important. I think one of the biggest places you can bring expertise as a designer to that process is learning how to listen to the playtesters. You might hear them say things which are patently untrue, or make suggestions which definitely won't help the game. But anytime they're doing that, they're actually talking about something which isn't quite right in the game for them.
Yeah.
And learning how to listen. So everything they say is valid.
Right.
You have your playtesters in general are all honest, and they're just they're giving their best. But you, as the designer, have to interpret how to take that, and it may be in a completely unexpected way from how they initially said it.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. So true. So with Creature Feature, you have different monsters that have different powers, and then you also have special helper cards. I guess this is kind of a design question and a playtesting question. Did you have all those different monsters and powers in mind, or how did you kind of roll those out? And then when you're playtesting, how do you keep track of making sure one card is not like sort of broken and one's not too powerful, or, how do you keep track of like having these variety of card powers, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to take that question. One is how many powers do you want? I like games with a lot of variety. On the other hand, if you sort of get unhinged and add too much variety, then nobody will take it seriously, which could be okay. They will play it sort of like in the spirit of, I look at the cards, oh, what's going to happen? I don't know. Anything could happen. But if you're more restrained, you can get people to learn those powers and incorporate them into the play, which I think can, with the right games, bring them a lot of pleasure, because that mastery is something that's a lot of fun. And so from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to have a restrained number of powers that added variety, but didn't make it feel to the players like it was something they couldn't manage. I mean, it's going to be pretty random the first time when they start playing, but they'll learn it very quickly.
Right.
And then as far as balance of those powers, it's a lot easier for a board game, the balancing, than it is for a trading card game or something like that. With a trading card game, if you mess up the balance, it can ruin everything. That's true for a board game as well, but it's less true because whatever is imbalanced will average itself out over time. And so the places, that doesn't mean that it's not an issue, but it does mean that it's a very different beast. And the way I manage that is just by getting players who get good enough to identify what they think is causing the swinginess. And then I think about that and decide whether we want to address it, because some level of swinginess is good. That I always shoot for games where where there's a lot of mastery possible, but the people who have mastered the game the most don't always win.
Right.
It's kind of boring when the same people always win.
Totally. Totally. So at what point did you start writing rules for Creature Feature? And I guess just in general, like with your, you've designed a ton of games. Was it different for this game, or do you have the same process for writing rules and timing for every game you work on?
Yeah, I think I usually write rules in the same way for most games, which is to say that when it's in the exploratory phase, I don't write rules. I just do take notes. Like I've got hundreds of Illustrator documents with just notes on the playtests in them. Okay. And when I open them up later, I have to reconstruct how you played. But usually they're in a closet for a reason, and so that reconstruction is oftentimes beneficial because it allows me to readdress that. There I am making excuses for sloppy record keeping, but there it is. In general, the first time I really write the rules down is when I think the game's done, and then I write it down, and always in the process of writing it down, it does change the game some. I realize that some of the mechanics don't work, or are a lot easier if I do them a different way, based on what I've written. Right. So it just turns out that, when you're writing it, I'll run up into cards that don't quite work the way I thought they would, and they're too complicated to explain, so I'll change them, things like that. Or I'll find that, this phase, which I thought should be at the end, should be at the beginning of the turn. But that's very late and in the process. And okay. Then and the changes that leads to are real, but they're pretty minor. And then if I've got a publisher like I did now, I send them the rules and we sort of work with that. If I don't, then that's what I send to a publisher after they say they're interested in looking at the game.
Cool, cool. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced when you were designing Creature Feature?
Yeah, Creature Feature, it came together pretty fast and pretty well. Again, because in part it was drawing off of a lot of previous designs. I would say that the biggest challenge was this issue that I mentioned previously about how many and what sort of special abilities do you want to have in the game, because the special abilities add the variety to the play, but they also increase the learning curve. Right. And a lot of the satisfaction for play does come from people mastering it enough that they feel like they can play it with some level of expertise. So the more sort of special stuff you throw at them, the harder that is. And so there was a lot of tinkering with that, making sure that players. And this is particularly important with what I was aiming for here with a bluffing game, because one of the problems with a lot of bluffing games is that players know they're supposed to be bluffing and they hit the game with that intent, but it turns out that you really have to know what you're doing before you really can bluff. And so it was really important to onboard people fast, so they felt like they could participate in this bluffing and calling bluffs mechanic. You really can't do that without some level of expertise.
So did you have any aha moments?
The biggest aha moment here was likely a mechanic which is really important to Creature Feature, and I'm really pleased with it, which is this idea that you can arrange your cards. So each round you play 2 cards and you reveal one. And by giving players the opportunity to reveal the smaller one or the larger one, but making the rule that if they reveal the larger one, they're bluffing and they will always lose unless everybody's doing that, was a real aha, because it actually put the game into a position which made it so that you don't feel obligated to bluff, which is one of the problems with bluffing games, is that people don't necessarily want to feel like they have to bluff, and that's one of the reasons why poker is actually a lot of is such a broad appeal, because when you play poker, you can play very well and never bluff. You just are playing the odds, right. And that's good for some people. That's what they like. And then other people who like the hot dog, they've got that opportunity too. And so this technique actually put that even more into the player's hand, because your decision as to whether to bluff or not in poker, you're dealt a hand, and right. And you have to sort of estimate how good that is, and you decide whether to bluff or not. Here, you're given 2 cards, and generally you can bluff with them, or you cannot bluff. And it's in your hands what you want to do. And so that means that if you play your cards honest, and everybody's folding, and then you naturally think, well, I could get an even bigger reward if I bluffed. And so now you're winning. And you're getting even bigger rewards, and everybody's going, hey, wait a minute, he's bluffing. So then they start, staying back and competing with you. And so you get this rock, paper, scissors behavior, which is in the hands of the players.
Yeah. And speaking of that staying back, I think it's really cool how you have that system where you can kind of drop down to either stay for the main feature or go to the short, just to compete for the short, or you can kind of fold. And even that, I felt like that decision is really interesting. Even in a lower player count game, we found that very, very interesting. Like, oh, you're going to drop down, or, oh, you're going to stay. Maybe I should drop down and compete with you on that lower thing. So I thought that was really interesting. Was that always your plan, to kind of have that system where you have those showdowns and, you could drop down to compete for less points?
No, that did come out. I knew I wanted something simple like that. I forget at what point in the process this became a matter of staying or dropping, and that was the analog of betting and raising and
Mm-hmm.
folding and so forth. Um, and that is really kind of different than poker. Also, this idea that like in poker, you stay or you fold.
Right.
But here, this idea of a string of extra smaller pools, yeah, was very different. And I did really like the play that came out of that.
Yeah, it's
And
cool.
yeah, and it was a lot of fun in playing around with that as it began to come together. So um, as you know, the round ends when everybody has stayed,
Mm-hmm.
and that puts this real pressure on the people early in the round because they want to go after everybody else, and they almost certainly can because somebody's going to probably make a move,
Right.
but there is some risk. And the further you go around, if nobody drops, suddenly you might be stuck in a place you're not expecting to be.
Right, right.
And so some of the early tests, there were actually people would get too complacent when they're playing with 6 people, because when you're going first with 6 people, of course somebody's going to go down. So why would you ever drop? You may as
Right.
well go afterwards. But then, every once in a while you get this hands where it was stay, 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 and then the last few people go, "You're all staying," and they say, "I'm going to stay." And the last person says, "Hell, I'll stay." And it's like everybody's in the top pool, and it's just this huge swing because one person's winning all those cards. So anyway, yeah, that was a fun mechanic to play with.
It's really cool. So how were the art and graphic design decisions made for Creature Feature?
Well, yeah, there are two parts to that: the art and the graphics. And then the studio got this artist
Okay.
who really. It was clear from his portfolio that he really loved that genre. I just had a great time working with him because he brought a lot to the table as far as to how to illustrate these things, and also some suggestions about different monsters to bring into the mix, and it really worked really
Sure.
smoothly.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I ended up really liking the look of the art. The graphics, that was also very easy for me. Jody, she just did a great job in incorporating the information
Yeah.
with something that was flavorful. Oftentimes when you're working with graphic designers, the flavor can get in the way of the information. And for gameplay, of course, I have to be there constantly being sort of the bad guy. You've got to get rid of that. It's like it's confusing, and it's not that I don't want a game that looks good, but
Right.
it's vital that it carries the information.
Right.
And she really, uh, the times where I gave feedback, she was very adaptable to that, and she took very little feedback, needed very little in that regard anyway, because and so what we ended up with something which I feel was really flavorful, but
Yeah.
did carry the information in a really clear way.
Yeah, it's clean, functional, and fits with the art and the overall vibe of the whole game.
I've got a lot of games I've worked with where this story is not nearly as smooth. Here, everything really came together
Yeah.
pretty well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. When and how did you come up with the name, or whoever came up with the name Creature Feature?
I don't know, pretty late. I think originally it was Monster Masquerade, and at one point it might have been double feature because I had the card which was the double feature in the game, and then yeah, and I forget. I might have come up with the name Creature Feature. I often come up with names, but I also don't tend to remember. So it might have been somebody else who came up with it. But whether it was me or somebody else, it was clearly a good name. It's just nice to have that
Totally.
rhyme. It completely evoked the genre which we were trying to get. And
Right,
so it
right.
was easy once it came out. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure whoever said it first, whenever it happened, it's like, oh, there it is, Eureka.
Yeah, yeah, it really, it's a good name. It does well. I mean, it's good enough, of course, that when I search for it, other things come up, which is not the best thing.
Right,
But still, not so much that I wouldn't that I would change it. I think it still works well.
yeah, it's super hooky. So Richard, do you have any advice for someone who's interested in designing a either card or board game that has bluffing as a core mechanism?
Play lots of games, and in particular if you're interested in bluffing games, play all the bluffing games. Figure out what makes them work, what makes them not work, and that's something I bring to all my design. I try to play everything, and playing everything doesn't it I don't feel like I've played it unless I've played it enough to really understand why it works for the audience it does. And for me, with the bluffing games, there's not that many, and so sort of connecting the dots between the ones I liked and what I liked about them was a big part of my process. And I've hit some of those things earlier that it's like, unless you're an expert, you can't bluff. You feel forced to bluff when you don't want to bluff, that sort of thing. But this hypothetical designer may want to design a game where everybody's forced to bluff at one point or another, which you're not in Creature Feature, but that's neither a good nor a bad thing. That's good for some audiences.
Right.
But you're always better off with the tools in your bag that come with the experience than you are without them, whether you decide to use them or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Thanks for joining me today on Cardboard Creations. I mean, it's really cool to hear the backstory for how, and just get some insight in your overall process, but how, the backstory for how you created Creature Feature. Is there anything else you think in the works for Creature Feature, like any expansions, or is there anything else that you're working on that you'd like to mention?
I think Creature Feature lends itself well to expansions that would not intrude upon the players who like the game. That's always a challenge with games, is to make an expansion that improves the game. And doesn't weigh it down, but don't particularly have planned yet. It sort of depends where that goes. And so I personally would like to run, and I've been talking about this with some folks, like run some tournaments with it, because I really think that if people played it with some level of seriousness, that they would be really rewarded and enjoy it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
For other games, working on a lot of digital games right now, which have such a long time horizon that it's hard to point anybody to them with any reliability. I really like auto battlers. They are in this. They're in this area which I find really exciting. I like all games, but I like the digital versions of board games that are sort of moved a little more. They're very close to board games, but they're on the digital side where you couldn't really do them with just paper. And so that's
cool.
what really I find appealing in that area.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I actually just played Challengers, which is a auto battler card game that just came out at Spiel. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh,
yet,
yeah.
But yeah.
No, definitely. I've worked on a bunch of paper auto battler games, but I haven't yet got one that I really liked. So I'm glad to see some people are
starting to dabble.
It's clear it's such a neat area that I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people trying to do it. And my problem was that as I was working on them, I always felt like this would be better on computer. Right? And of course, it's the genre is designed for computer. I'm sure we could take some things into paper, and maybe Challengers has done it in a good way. But it's an exciting area.
Yeah, check it out, see what you think. But anyways, thank you again, Richard. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being here. It was awesome to talk to you and have you on.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always a lot of fun to talk games.
Agreed. Thank you all for watching Cardboard Creations. Hopefully it's been as inspiring and fascinating for you as it has been for me. And remember, the only way to get something done is to start doing it.